Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining me here today. Today, our government is introducing Bill 26, the Immigration Oversight Act. Before I get into the contents of the bill, I want to first lay the foundation for what brought us here today. For a long time, immigration worked in Canada, as it was done sustainably and was used to address economic needs and fill gaps in the labour force. Along with Canada, Alberta has always been a place that has welcomed immigration, and we will continue to do exactly that. However, the system right now has become unmanageable with mass influx in the number of temporary foreign workers, asylum seekers, and international students. To put this into perspective, from 2021 to 2025, the number of work permit holders in Alberta grew from 45,000 to almost 180,000 people. Now let me be clear, this comes with a significant cost. While the federal government is responsible for issuing visas and work permits, it is the province who delivers education, healthcare, and most other social services. Not to mention, this was done at a time when we were facing high unemployment among youth and, even to this day, our broader population. Immigration needs to be done properly, and what we have seen from the federal government is that they are incapable or simply choosing not to do that. We continue to see bad decisions like lowering the number of provincial nominees that are used for targeted labour shortages, along with broad increases to temporary foreign worker programs without consulting the provinces and the provincial governments. On top of this, we have seen very real cases of abuse and exploitation right here in Alberta through the temporary foreign worker program. Immigration, as it laid out in the Constitution Act, is a shared responsibility. That is why our government is taking more control over immigration in the province of Alberta. This will begin with Bill 26, the Immigration Oversight Act. If passed, this legislation will enhance oversight of employers, international recruiters, and immigration consultants involved in the recruitment, advertisement, and employment of foreign nationals. It will create a public registry for employers who wish to hire temporary foreign workers in Alberta, require immigration consultants and recruiters to be provincially licensed, and set out enforcement tools that can be used against registered and licensed businesses and individuals who break these rules. These changes bring Alberta in line with other Canadian provinces while also tailoring our approach to Alberta's needs and priorities. Our goal is to create an immigration system that strengthens our economy and is worthy of the trust of Albertans. Bill 26 sets expectations for conduct and increased transparency, ensuring newcomers to Alberta can have confidence they are not being taken advantage of. Further to this, creating a registry and licensing requirements will give the province more direct information about the labour market, which has often been left up to the federal government for how much or how little they choose to disclose. We want immigration to be used for legitimate economic needs, filling real gaps for in-demand industries. What we have seen to date is a system that bypasses Canadian youth for jobs and chooses to hire foreign nationals for entry-level positions, and our government wants to know why. On protection, the legislation will prohibit a range of practices such as charging for job offers, misrepresenting employment conditions, keeping workers' official documents, and more. Under the Act, Alberta's government will have authority to investigate, issue compliance orders and administrative penalties, and suspend or cancel registrations and licenses if required. This means timely action to hold bad actors accountable and restore trust in our immigration system. Building this framework will not happen overnight. Bill 26 has been designed to allow for a transition over time to the new system. As regulations are developed, employers and service providers already in the province will have the time to comply with the new requirements, ensuring there is no unnecessary disruption while strengthening provincial oversight in the system. In closing, I would like to once again highlight my mandate from the Premier, Danielle Smith, which is to use all legal means possible to take more control over immigration with the goal of making it more sustainable and economically focused here in Alberta. As immigration to Alberta continues, it must support our economy, respond to genuine labour market need, and maintain fairness, transparency, and the confidence of Albertans. If passed, the Immigration Oversight Act will do exactly that. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions and turn it over to my press secretary.
All right, well, thank you, Minister. We'll start here with questions in the room. We'll start in the back this time with Cindy. Go ahead.
Hi, Minister. Cindy Tran with the Edmonton Journal. So when it comes to the licensing requirements, we're told that immigration consultants already have to be a member of the College of Immigration. And so why have a second licensing program that these individuals have to go through again?
So it's important that while immigration consultants and employers and employment recruiters rather are compliant with the federal regulation, they're also compliant with Alberta's. We're setting terms that will meet the demands of Alberta's labour market while also making sure that employees coming to Alberta to work are not doing so under false pretenses, and they're not coming to harmful or toxic work situations. This is really about protecting workers who are coming here and making sure we're addressing the labour market needs that we have as a province.
And what terms would those be then under this new provincial licensing?
So we're working through that with my department through the regulation process, but I can assure you and all Albertans that this is going to be a transparent and fair process, understanding that our job here is not to disrupt business, but rather to augment the work being done by Albertans, and where there's need for new employees coming from out of country, they're coming here under with a clear understanding of the expectations of them, things like what they're going to be paid, what the work and living experiences will be like, so they don't come here under false pretenses. And furthermore, this is about reputation. Alberta is an incredible province in which to work, and we want to maintain that reputation around the world. If people are coming here to work and they show up on their first day and it is not what they were sold by an employment recruiter or by an immigration consultant, that information, that gets back to other people around the world, and we do not want that reputation. So this is about protecting Alberta's reputation, and it's also about protecting the workers who are coming here.
Yeah, Natasha Reed with the CDC. Which industries are reporting or are known to have these cases that you're calling of abuse and exploitation?
So we've heard stories broadly across industry, and thank you for the question, Natasha. What I would say is we're responding to what we've heard from people who are calling in, anonymously, and others who have said there are problems. We've also heard this from other jurisdictions around Canada. Protecting Alberta's reputation as a premier destination to work is key for us, and also making sure that employees who are coming here to work are doing so under the proper terms and conditions, and they're not being misled by employment recruiters and by immigration consultants. There are great actors in this business, but there are also ones who are skirting the law, skirting the rules, and this regulation, and rather this law, this bill is intended to bring us in line with other jurisdictions while also making us a place that has more information about the kinds of jobs that are being available, and making sure that we're filling those labour gaps either with Albertans first, and if not, then we can go to a province in our country to find those workers.
You're saying there's good actors in this business, but this spans many industries and businesses. Can you just give me an example of like the top 2 or 3 that are reporting these abuses?
I wouldn't do that, because if I did, then you go looking into those industries and start asking questions to them. I don't want to highlight anyone specific. This is about broadly addressing immigration consultants and recruiters across the province to make sure everyone is compliant. So I'm not about to get up here and go full Jose Canseco and start naming names, but what I am going to say is that it's important that we protect workers coming here, and that's what this bill does. And we set clear, transparent guidelines for those who are recruiting.
I know, I'm just asking for the types of jobs.
Sorry, we're going to jump to Catherine here.
Sure, Catherine Gurkowski, all Alberta. So I'm wondering, you did give high-level examples of things like withholding documents or pay for work. Can you share some more anecdotal stories that you've heard, some of the more egregious examples of violation of workers' rights?
Well, we've heard examples of things like selling job offers to foreign nationals, providing false and misleading or incomplete information to government officials. This has happened, people who are failing to comply with registration and licensing conditions. So it's things like this that we are looking to curtail as a province, and that's what this bill intends to do.
And I believe under the temporary foreign worker program, businesses would need to have that positive labor market impact assessment. So I'm wondering, will you go further? Will you have powers to say, hey business, show me the resumes you got and prove that a Canadian national did not apply for this job, or any other additional powers beyond that impact assessment that you're looking for?
Well, the expectation is that employers will submit to us something akin to a federal labor market impact assessment, so we can address the need as well and assess whether it's legitimate or not. That'll all be done through my department. And what this comes down to is addressing things like unemployment in Alberta, making sure that Albertans have first crack at Alberta jobs, and also making sure that we are addressing the unemployment rate that we've seen among youth, particularly with entry-level positions. And we've talked about this lots in previous press conferences. People are talking about their kids can't find work. We want to address that across the board, so make sure that the needs and the demands that businesses are putting forward are legitimate. We saw over the weekend there was a job fair in Calgary that had a lineup for hours upon hours only to meet a number of employers. Kids in Alberta want to work. They want to work. We have an incredible workforce in this province, and we need to continue to develop it. So it's also incumbent upon businesses, as much as possible, though it does come with risk, to reinvest in Alberta's youth, to give them that first hiring and employment experience. But we also know that the labor and the employees that we need right now, as we continue to attract investment and develop our industries, may not be readily available at this exact moment. So we have to look to temporary workers. We have to also look to other permanent residents. And so that's why this program is existing. That's why we're getting more involved as a province.
What about Jack here?
Jack Crow with Canadian Press. Back to the specific industries, I'm not going to ask you the same question, but in your opening remarks, you had said the temporary foreign worker program, the system as we've seen to date, kind of bypasses Canadians for jobs and chooses to hire foreign nationals for entry-level positions. I know like fast food and like restaurants are kind of like I would say a key industry that relies on temporary foreign workers a lot. Do you think this bill and kind of what the government's going to do will I guess like tamp down on the amount of temporary foreign workers that are working in that industry in Alberta?
The purpose of the temporary foreign worker program was to support industries where it is particularly difficult to find labor locally. And speaking from personal experience, as I've spoken with constituents of my own in agriculture, it is very difficult. And so we need to continue to support industries like manufacturing and agriculture where it is difficult to find those positions. But what I can say is that in Q3 of 2021, there were, from the temporary foreign worker perspective, there were 45,000 work permit holders in Alberta. Flash forward to Q1 of 2026, there's just over 160,000, and if you go back to 2025, we almost reached 180,000. It is clear that in some instances, we have become over-reliant on temporary foreign workers, and as a result, some of the jobs that usually would have gone to Albertans as entry-level positions are now going to temporary workers. And so the spirit, the intent of this program was never to have a temporary foreign worker at a fast food restaurant in downtown Calgary. As we saw, as I mentioned earlier in this conference, there was a lineup for hours of youth just looking for any employment opportunity. And we as a government have a role to play to ensure that they have the best chance possible to get that first work experience.
And then as a follow-up, I don't know if you talked to the business lobby leading up to developing this bill, but are you expecting the business groups to be a little peeved at this?
Well, people don't always like change, and I expect that. But I can tell you that I've heard proactively from businesses reaching out and employees who have said, we have a concern about some of the way that employers, recruiters, and employment consultants are recruiting into the province, the way some businesses are operating, and we don't think it's a fair playing field. And also, I would say the government doesn't have a clear line of sight on what businesses are recruiting into Alberta right now. The federal government doesn't share that information with us readily, and so this will also give us access to more data about the kinds of jobs that are going to temporary workers, so we can better tailor programs that we have and better tailor our understanding to address these employment issues in Alberta. Thanks for the question, Jack.
Yeah, we'll jump to Janet here in the front row, and then we're going to jump to the phones, and we'll come back to the room.
Oh, Janet French from the CBC. So I was just looking at the BC website, and they've got a warning there saying that processing applications to become registered in BC to hire TFWs is more than 6 weeks because there's a delay, right? I know your government is not a big fan of red tape, so how do you plan to ensure that Alberta employers aren't sort of caught up in this waiting time? Will there be an increase in the number of workers hired in the jobs ministry to handle applications, handle enforcement?
Great question, and you're right. We are not a government that likes red tape, and we've taken measurable steps to reduce it. In fact, we've saved Albertans nearly $3 billion since 2019, just cutting red tape alone. But as I said in my opening remarks, this will be a slowly transition period, so that businesses aren't caught off guard and they can adjust to the new normal, which is having to go through another process. I understand that this may not be the most popular thing at the outset, but it's important, again, to go back to the fundamental issue that poor management of the federal government's immigration system, which is usually the problems there are manifest in the provinces. We're the ones on the hook for healthcare, education, and infrastructure, and we're happy to do that. We're happy to be the ones who support those projects because we have incredible frontline workers, but we also have to be able to afford it, and we have to manage that in a way that we can balance the needs of the private sector with also the cost that we have to put out as a government. So, again, I've heard proactively from businesses, we've heard from employees about, some of the concerns they have, but this will be phased in over time, and a lot of the finer details will be worked out through regulations, so you can expect that. But this legislation, as it sets, is protecting Albertans and protecting Alberta workers and those coming to work here in the province from out of country.
So we're hearing your remarks about your concerns about federal immigration policy.
Yes.
Help me draw a connection between how this legislation addresses your perception of this larger influx. Like, how is it intended to reduce the number of temporary foreign workers working in Alberta?
What it's intended to do is make sure that businesses that are hiring people coming from out of country are actually doing so because they cannot find work here. They cannot find the employees they need in Alberta. That is the fundamental problem we're looking to solve. The other issue is that when people come to Canada for employment opportunities, they may come to a place like Vancouver or Toronto or Montreal or other cities and then move to Alberta. And we don't have information on this. We don't know exactly how many people precisely are coming here to Alberta, which makes it difficult for us to do things like plan budgets and build schools, build hospitals and the like. So we are addressing a problem where possible, and this legislation will also give us access to data that we have not had in the past and that has not been readily shared by the federal government.
Okay, we're going to jump to the phones here and take a few questions there. Operator, can you put through our first caller?
We have a question from Matthew's Case from the Globe and Mail. Your line is open.
Hi, Minister. One of my colleagues mentioned BC and other provinces that have their own in-house systems. How different do you expect Alberta's regulations to be from those provinces? Will they be more strict?
Well, you can expect Alberta to take lessons from other provinces and see how they've done it well and tailor it to what's going to work well for here in Alberta. It'd be early for me to go into great detail about what that's going to look like, but as other provinces have legislation like this, like Manitoba, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and you mentioned BC and Saskatchewan, we'll create a system that works for us.
Okay, and a follow-up, Matt?
Just following up on another question that was asked. Yes or no, is this fundamentally about restricting the number of TFWs coming into Alberta?
No, absolutely not. In fact, what this is about is making sure we understand the labor market better understand that we can meet the demands of tomorrow by supporting the labor market, whether it's through workers here in Alberta and training in jobs and skills, or bringing in a workforce that isn't here already. But it's also about making sure that the spirit and the intent of programs that we have in place, like the temporary foreign worker program, are meeting their goals, they're meeting their objectives. Because as I mentioned, the federal government and the provincial government under the Constitution have shared responsibility over immigration. But we feel over time that shared responsibility has become more of a lopsided relationship. So we're taking all legal means possible, which is in my mandate letter from the Premier, to take more control over provincial immigration. And in doing so, it will support the businesses in Alberta, and it will create a more transparent process for people coming from out of country to work.
And operator, can you put through our second caller?
I have a question from Felix Gagnet from Radio Canada. Your line is open.
All right. It could be quite hard for a temporary foreign worker to take action against an offending employer because a lot of permits are employer-specific. What would this register do to help those workers to go forward with a complaint, by example?
Felix, I'm sorry. I think I missed the first part of that question. Could you maybe rephrase or just say it again?
Yeah. A lot of working permits for temporary foreign workers are employer-specific. So what would this? So it's hard for them to go forward against an employer. They could lose their permit. What would this register do to help workers to go forward with a complaint?
Okay, I understand. So this is about the complaint process as permits are attached to employers. So we will have a process for complaints so that it can be discreet and done in a way that's doesn't necessarily harm a worker. Especially, this is about protecting workers. So we don't want them to bear the brunt or be in a bad position because they have a bad employer. So we'll be working through these processes, again, one that meets the needs of Alberta, but also will protect workers, but we'll enforce this law. Like it is very important to note that we will not tolerate as a province businesses that will recruit and employ people from out of country under false pretenses and take advantage of a system that is meant to support Alberta's workforce, not to hinder it.
Do you have a follow-up, Felix?
Yes. What would be the mechanism or the stuff in this bill that will help redirect those temporary foreign workers towards the market needs?
Well, the market will determine need, and employers will recruit based on that need. So this new process will enable us to better understand what those needs are, but also ensure that the recruitment process is done transparently. So maybe that doesn't fully answer your question, but we understand that there is a lot of need, particularly in manufacturing in the province of Alberta agriculture, where workers are being recruited come out of country, and we welcome those workers. But it has to be done in a way that we're not limiting employment opportunities for youth. We're not hindering opportunities for Albertans to have first crack at those jobs. And we're also, again, not coming under false terms.
Okay, we've got time for two more questions. We'll take one from the phone, and then we'll take the last one from the room here. Operator, can you put through our next caller?
We have Zoe Mason from Medicine Hat News. Your line is open.
Thanks for taking my question. It seems like there's some duplication here with the role the federal government already takes on in terms of regulating employers under the temporary foreign worker program. And I know details about terms are forthcoming by regulation, but what are some regulations the province wants to add that are not already part of the federal guidelines?
So we're working through all this, but it does again come down to need. Alberta knows what Alberta needs best when it comes to recruiting employees. And so while there is a registration and it will add steps for employers and will duplicate some work, we expect that this will be a process that's done seamlessly, transitioned in a way that doesn't slam everything onto businesses all at once, that they can make the proper adjustments over time. But it really comes down to what do we need versus what does the federal government think we need. And so long as we have not seen the responses we would like from the federal government on immigration particularly, understanding that the decisions that they make have significant effects on our province, both financially and from access to services perspective, as long as that's the case, this is in dire need. So I understand that some may look at this as a duplicative process. I look at this as necessary.
Do you have a follow-up, Zoe?
Yeah. One of the questions in the upcoming referendum asks Albertans whether they support the government of Alberta in taking increased control over immigration. Why not wait until the results of that referendum are in to put forward this policy? Why now?
Well, I think you're conflating two different things. So the referendum does have the 5 specific questions about immigration, but this is in need right now. And this is important for us to address immediately as we understand that this will give us access to more data, what the employment spectrum looks like in Alberta. So this is not undermining, but this is actually augmenting the referendum, and this is taking initial steps that whether we have a referendum or not, we should be doing this. This is necessary here in Alberta now, and we don't need to wait for the referendum to get feedback on whether or not we should make sure that there is a fair and transparent process for bringing workers into Alberta and make sure we have a process that protects Alberta workers and making sure they have first crack at Alberta jobs.
Okay, last question in the room here. We'll go to Sean.
Sean.
Sean Amato with City News. When it comes to the investigations or enforcement piece of this, who will do that work, and will the Alberta Sheriffs be involved in any way?
So it's important to take into consideration that this legislation is about working with the employers and the recruitment, and the immigration consultants and the employment recruiters. So this doesn't have anything to do with the employees so much as when it comes to enforcement. My department will have a division within it that will deal with the enforcement and the monitoring of this, as well as taking in the applications as people recruit and look to bring in workers from out of the province and out of the country. But any other matters, that would be beyond the scope of this legislation.
So Sheriff's not involved at this point?
If there is anything that's done contrary to the law, it would be referred to law enforcement.
Okay. And just, I have to ask you about your government's legislative agenda as a whole here, because you started out...
You're asking the right guy.
Exactly. You started out with the MAID law, essentially telling people, you know, deciding which people have a right to die by MAID. A bill yesterday is mandating flag uses in schools and forcing kids to listen to the national anthem. Now you're creating a registry and more layers of red tape over top of what already exists in terms of immigration. So I guess, is this still a freedom conservative government that we have here? Or, you know, what do you say to people who say, I elected the Conservatives because I believe in small government and allowing people to do what they want to do generally?
I'm not really sure where to go first with that question, Sean. There was a lot there, but I'll do my best. No, I will answer it as much as I can here. First, with regards to who has a right to die, that would be your characterization, not our government's. Ours is about protecting the value of life. Life has value, and that's important to our government, and we've heard from a number of stakeholders about this. The MAID is a federal legislation, but the province enforces it, and we're putting guidelines around it because that's important. Life matters. Second thing is, I don't think anyone would characterize the legislation introduced by Minister Nicolaides as forcing children to listen to the national anthem, the country in which they live. This is a beautiful country. I love this country. And I have no idea why anyone would characterize that bill as forcing kids to listen to the national anthem. When I went to when I was in junior high and high school, I listened to the national anthem every day, and I was proud of that anthem. My grandfather fought in the Second World War, and so I'm actually kind of flabbergasted you pose that question that way, Sean.
Well, you can listen to that on your own time, but putting it in legislation, making other people have to listen to it, that's government control, right?
Again, I would disagree with you fundamentally that playing the national anthem in schools in Canada would be forcing kids to listen to the national anthem.
That's literally what it means,
well,
sir.
I'll step in here.
Sean, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. You know that.
Okay, thank you everyone for your time today. Just a reminder, today's press conference contents are under embargo until the legislation is tabled this